All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the gratitude we have towards the many Indigenous nations who call this valley their homelands. Many thanks to the Blackfeet, Crow, Shoshone, and others who have lived here since time immemorial and protected the waters, land, air, and animals. May we proceed with the spirit of respect and generosity that these nations have displayed. And the credit goes to Dr. Shane Doyle for that land acknowledgement. So thank you to him for giving that beautiful statement to us. My name is Allison. Pronouns are she, her. I am the executive director of the Gallatin County Democrats. I have the honor of working full time right now for the Democratic Party locally. And so one of the things that we've been doing is making sure that we have a lot of resources and time with our legislators. And one of the benefits of being in the midst of a pandemic is that we're all online. And so we can have these conversations with people at great time. So with that, tonight, we are going to be speaking with Representative Denise Hayman from House District 66 and Senator Chris Pope from Senate District 31. The topic tonight is all things energy, but I'm sure we'll talk about some other things first. As I mentioned, we are recording this, so we will share. So if you don't want to be on camera, feel free to turn it off and just make comments in the chat or raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can join on camera if you would like, or just be the voice from above. I've done that before. So Denise and Chris, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time because I know that you're probably a little tired.
uh, yeah, it's been going so quickly. You don't have time to even recoup. You celebrate what tiny successes you have, and boy, you just got to move right on and deal with the next bill coming your way. So that's kind of how it's been for me. Chris, how about you?
Well, same. I've been sleeping all day, pretty much. So I don't know if you can tell. Yeah, you kind of can. I think we've been just hard at it, and not necessarily in the most productive sense of that word, as we'll talk, because it's been incredibly challenging. Probably certainly the most challenging in my short sort of history, 3 sessions now, but. You talk to the old timers, the folks that have really been around. This is definitely one for the ages. This has been a really tough couple months.
Yeah.
But we're still standing.
You're still standing. You're still here, and we're so grateful for that. So I am going to open it up to questions, but first, I would love to know what has been the biggest surprise so far this session. So Denise, if you want to answer that question.
I wish I could say there's only been one thing that has surprised me. We are constantly being surprised by the lack of communication by leadership. So you think that you have an agreement, and then you find out that you don't. And that puts you in a different place mentally. So you're constantly challenged. There are statements made on the floor that are patently wrong and not factual. And if you stand up and try and dispute that, then you're dealing with a whole onslaught of people standing up and telling more lies, because that's what they are. And you're just constantly barraged with that. Whereas there would have been in previous sessions you would find one or two individuals, approaching the session like that. But this session, there are a whole group of Republicans who are willing to lie on the floor, plain and simple. Chris?
Well, I was gonna just make a note that somehow in this world, the right to work efforts died. We were able to protect the unions so far. And that to me is an incredible win. I mean, we have lost on so many other places and lots of conflict and strife, and we'll talk about that. But that has been my surprise when you sit there and you go, "Oh my God, that just went south." And the Dems are like a monolith on that subject, but it had to do with some very significant splits in the Republican Party, and I was, there's not much room for relief, but that was a little sliver of relief and a surprise.
Agreed. I was really surprised by the margin on that one, like
Yeah.
how many actually voted against it yesterday. So
Yeah.
for those of you who may not know, there was a right to work bill that was presented or sponsored by Representative Caleb Hinkle, who represents one of the districts here in Gallatin County. And it would have significantly impacted Montana workers and living, wages. I don't have the numbers in my head, but I think something like compared to Idaho, for example, construction workers earn $9,000 less a year than those in Montana. And that's just like one example of how right to work laws can really negatively impact wages in Montana. So that died in the House yesterday, which like first thing in the morning, that was the first thing that happened. So that was huge. So feel free to raise your hand if you have questions. You can either wave at me or use the icon under the reactions on the menu bar, or post them in the comments or send them to me privately if you don't want it to be put there. But Elizabeth has a question and you can unmute yourself.
So sorry. So because there was a victory on right to work, do you think there's going to be retribution by the Republican Party in general? And then secondly, and this can be a totally different subject and maybe you can address it at some point, do you think there's any redemption for the Gallatin County Republican legislators? Take as long as you need.
Well, I'm happy to take a stab at that. Is there going to be retribution? We heard that some Republicans who voted that bill down were getting threats. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I don't find that hard to believe. And what was your second question, Elizabeth? Oh, the
redeeming value for the Gallatin Republican delegation.
Well, it'll be interesting because we have Jane Gillette, who has brought some really, really bad bills, bad bills to the point of I'm getting called by moderate Republicans and saying, "Oh my God, who is this person?" And I'm like, "She's a Republican. She's with your party." She brought a bill. She didn't move it forward, but she had it drafted that would allow someone who rapes a woman to have some sort of say in the raising of a child if a child was created from that. Somebody in her party, I think, took her aside and said, gee, I don't think you want to do that. Probably in stronger words than I'm using, but that's just one example of the bills that they're bringing. And then we have the Hinkle brothers who are bringing really bad bills. And then you've got a Republican Party in Gallatin County who wants to elect Art Whittick again and others such as Art. We had Derek Skees in state admin try and do away with the Committee for Political Practices. And he openly said in his presentation of the bill that he wanted us to remove Jeff Mangan and ultimately appoint Art Whittick as political practices commissioner. And so all of these really outrageous, and you could say, oh my God, how crazy is that? But they believe this. That's the problem. They have no filter. They are saying things currently that you can't imagine that they would have said last session. So that's what I'm seeing. This real bravado, this real in your face, challenging you, treating you disrespectfully. Yeah, it's all happening. At least on the House side. How's it going on the Senate side, Chris?
Well, it's similar. It's probably not quite as vituperative. I mean, it's the Senate's a little more moderate, maybe a little more chill, but not much. Maybe my comment would be that others in our immediate vicinity in the Gallatin Valley now have a record, and that's really at the heart of this. And what Denise is talking about is now the Hinkles and the Gillettes of the world have to defend a record that I think was surprising in its in just how undisciplined, the amount of overreach. We use a phrase oftentimes in the Senate these days that says, they're just running the table. And so, you do that at a certain risk. It unfortunately doesn't give us any opportunity in the moment, but in 2 years from now, that set of records is going to be front and center. It'll be published in the paper. There's no denying that, without getting into specific names, that there are folks who aren't representing themselves properly at the door, who have misrepresented their positions, and that's going to come to bear, and that will get reckoned. And I know Allison is keeping very detailed notes and has an immediate action plan on that subject. By next year, she will have the goods on these folks, and they can't, hide and, just do their theatrics. The vote is the bottom line, and we're going to have them hopefully right where we need them.
We will have the action plan, and everyone is welcome to participate.
Yeah.
And Gordy Vance will be up for election at that time too. So we'll have more opportunities, and these guys are all 2 years. So
that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Caroline, you have your hand up.
Well, that was just the perfect segue. And first off, thank you for doing this hard work, which must be just so soul crushing and exhausting and difficult. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am, and I think we all are, for your service. But that was my question. And so, Chris, you just introduced it perfectly as like, moving forward, where's the accountability? Right. Who is the most vulnerable and on what issues? And how do we make sure that Montana realizes what is, because we're all obviously interested in participating because we're here, but how do we make sure that Montana knows that this is not, this is a direction that in my memory here, we have never headed for. So, yeah.
There's another angle of, analysis on this, which is that Gallatin Valley and Bozeman in particular is seen as a very privileged place, which in so many ways we are. You know, we have this university that's just a rock star, and we have a wonderful hospital system, and we have a lot of small biz, and we've got an arts community, beat the band and the whole bit. I mean, you know, it gives me shivers just saying that sentence. And at this point, you know, all of us, Denise and I and the rest of our group, are really going to have to double down to reach out to Montana, because we're misunderstood. And many of the issues that we care about, you know, the local government control is one that's, you know, at the heart and soul. I'm on a local government committee on the Senate side, and you know, and I hate to say it, because I spend a lot of my time trying to sort of not go there, which is this urban rural divide thing, having to do with, you know, subdivision review. Our subdivision laws, good, bad, and ugly. I mean, they're not perfect, but they are under massive attack. You know, that we weaken the nitrate levels in our water, so you can go ahead and put septic systems, you know, 200 feet apart, even though the DEQ or the DNRC would require a 500 or 1500 foot separation. I mean, they're weakening these laws. We saw it with concealed carry guns. We cannot regulate concealed carry in our towns in public spaces. People can do whatever they want to in their private homes. But the idea that we, you know, of course, you know, the state government, the legislators did at the last minute outlaw guns in state government in the Capitol building. So I guess they are watching out for their own butts to a degree, but we really are losing the battle about our ability as a local government, you know, to call the shots, and to, you know, every town's different. Miles City's different than Missoula, and we're going to have those differences, but we need to let those differences be the core of who we are, and a celebration. And we are losing that battle in a big way. State government is becoming monolithic and is dictating to its constituents how things shall happen on the ground. And it's very, very disturbing. And so we're going to have to reach out to agricultural communities and say, tell us what you need. Broadband. Okay, fine. Telemedicine. Let's work on that. Let's get some money. Let's work it. But you have to listen to us. We have 1 million tourists coming through our town every year, and we pay for them to be here. And we need some support to help figure out a way to make that work for everybody. So I'll shut up, but there's such work to do from the Bozeman perspective. It is the partisan piece, but it's actually, unfortunately, a little bit more embedded. I don't know if Denise, if you agree with that, but I think there's just this perception. We're almost two different countries or two different states, and the urban and the rural part, and we have to figure out how to get back together. Anyway, sorry, I spoke too long, as usual.
That's all right, Chris. To follow up with Chris's statement, we have seen numerous bills that take the right of local control away, such as decisions by county commissioners, decisions by health departments, decisions by city commissions. The list goes on. And then there are the bills passing that limit the governor's authority during an emergency, that he has to come to the legislature after 60 days. Well, we know oftentimes an emergency is going to be longer than 60 days. I mean, this pandemic is a perfect example of that. So it demands that the governor would have to come to the legislature. Through the Secretary of State, we'd have to vote on whether we come back in for a special session or whether we give him authority. I mean, the whole thing is designed for chaos. Who's in charge? Who's really going to be the decision maker? And right now, legislators in Helena are hell bent to limit the governor's authority, the health department's authority, local government's authority, you name it, they want to be involved, they being the legislature. And it's a nightmare what they're designing.
Agreed. So there's a question in the chat that I'll ask here in a second, Sarah, but like I kind of want to bring it to our topic that we're sort of supposed to be talking about tonight, which is energy. And so, but this kind of ties in really well with a question that I have about and I am not very well versed in this, but right now there's a law that if we're going to have nuclear power in Montana, it has to be presented to the voters first, or something like that, right? And that is actually there's a bill that would take that away, right? And
Skis passed that bill.
Okay.
Out of the House. It's coming Chris's way. Yes, you're absolutely right. So in 1997, I think, I may have, or in the 70s, I'm so tired, I can't think of the exact date, but a long time, like 40 years ago, there was a referendum, and the Montanans voted that it was laid out very simply and clearly that if there were any nuclear projects, that those projects should go back to the voters for approval. Plain and simple. It was a simple referendum. Skis came up with this bill that strips out the right of Montanans to vote on that. So if there is now according to his bill, if there is a nuclear project proposed and his bill passes on Senate side and the governor signs it, we won't have a say, other than writing our letters and, protesting and whatever. No, it's not a good bill. And the language he used to pass it on the floor of the House of, oh, Montanans didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't fully understand. That is such garbage. Montanans knew what they were doing. So
Can
Chris,
we make the same argument about why why so many Republicans were voted into office this last year? Can we make that same argument then? Anyway, that's just a side note. Chris, any thoughts on that?
We had a bill on the Senate side that went through to create a study on something called small nuclear generators. And, it's not harmless, but it's almost harmless. I mean, the sense of, we go study this as a technology, but I mean, this nuclear technology, as I understand it, is 8 to 10 to 12, 15 years out. And when we get, 5 years out, we're in a different world on energy, which we'll talk about in a second. I mean, things are changing so rapidly. I would certainly be voting against anything like what Denise just described that might come to the Senate. I sit on the Energy Committee, but that would require a very large vote, number one, right? A 2/3 vote, Denise, or 3/4 vote, because you're trying to change the Constitution. Is that true? Anyway, you're Denise. Yeah.
Sorry. It's not the Constitution, it's a referendum. And I think it's just a majority vote. I don't recall that it's 2/3, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. So there are little pockets of interest, and there always have been on nuclear. I don't think it's a big, massive movement. And these technologies are way out there and they're not necessarily cost effective. So I think we still have a little bit of comfort, but watching that like a hawk.
That's good. Thank you. Thanks for answering that and at least bringing up some energy stuff. But the question that Sarah had was about lack of control seems contrary to the Republican agenda. And is it a party-wide thing that we're seeing in the Republican Party, or is it just a certain sector, like, a certain caucus of the Republicans in the session this year? And then kind of follow up, how, like, do you have any ideas on how we in Gallatin and maybe the more urban communities could reach out across the state, across this urban rural divide that we're seeing?
Well, there's, I call it an upside down cake. The Republican Party used to be a business type group of folks who knew what a balance sheet was and could figure out what net operating income looked like. These folks don't have a clue about that. They're all about ideological positions on, they're essentially monopolists. They're interested in socializing costs for our coal plant, for example, talking about energy. They want to go and start patching back and maybe running these plants, even though they're not least cost. I mean, these folks are in the woods as a group. There's no energy policy. It's just a fixation on the rearview mirror. And I personally, it's incredibly frustrating to be sitting, I know Denise will echo this, sitting in these meetings and spending a lot of time trying to think through and work on these various bills that come through, where these bills are anti-business. I can give some examples about bills that we've heard in the past 10 days on the Senate side that would reach down into private contracts of Colstrip. So and break and create a whole new operating regime for the 6 owners. They're all from out of state, including Northwest Energy's based out of South Dakota. So all of the owners of Colstrip are from out of state. And the state legislature is dipping its hand down there, and we have bills going to Denise that say, we're going to modify your partnership agreement, which is like totally outrageous, and it's also unconstitutional. It'll hit the courts in a nanosecond, and they'll lose that. But this is it's brazen, unvarnished, ideological. It has no business aspect to it, and they're gonna, the real. Well, and I'll shut up after the real piece of this that's just incredibly discomforting is the impact it'll have on captive ratepayers, right? So the whole regulatory process and the legislature, in theory, are all set up to keep our utilities healthy, but also to make sure that these captive ratepayers don't get, shoved a whole bunch of extra costs. And Denise has had bills that in past sessions that speak to specifically to some of these outrageous costs that have been put in the rate base that shouldn't be there. And we have a Republican Party that's just going to keep doing that until they get voted out of office. And so far, they're doing it very effectively. So we all have to, we have to be on high alert. And high alert for Denise and I mean that we lose these bills anyway. We know exactly what they're doing. And in some cases, they're not even spending any time to finesse it anymore. They're just simply standing and saying, we're going to kill renewables and we're just going to go for coal. That's what we're going to do. And it's like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. But that's the world we live in.
Where's the innovation in that?
Well, and where's the business sense? And where's the, at least a nod? I mean, you don't have to be all about free markets. We know that capitalism has its very sharp edges, but we're at a point with renewables where free markets now will deliver the day for us. Mm-hmm. And so ironically, we're the ones now saying, just let it rock and roll. Even take the subsidies away. We're gonna compete, and we're gonna beat you at this. But no, now they're going to start throwing all this sort of monolithic, non-market, not friendly stuff into the mix and say, you shall stay with coal because we can't have that kind of disruption in our state. Mm-hmm. And hello, look at the lumber industry. I mean, there's 50 examples, Anaconda. We do to go through transitions. I'm going to be bringing a bill next half. And Denise, I'm going to need your help on this, which is to create an office of just transition, which is to address the issues that are being felt in the current coal communities. It's an effort by a Bozeman person to say, I care about that rural I care about the rest of this state. So maybe you'll listen next time we bring a local option tax bill. But let's address in a structural, systematic way what's really happening to these communities that are just getting hammered. And it's not to pay the bill, but it's to give a hand up, and it's to anticipate it as a state, not just because they're on their own and good luck. So there's an awful lot that the Republicans are not doing. There's not a single initiative coming out outside of just protecting Colstrip. Spoken too much again, sorry.
So that was a question, what sort of renewable energy is best for Montana? And then following up with that, are there any actual bills, or have there been, that would work or encourage diversifying our energy policies in Montana? Sandra, thanks for that question.
Let me answer that. We just passed expanding net metering. It was a great vote. I think it was 83-13, something like that. And we've been working on that. Chris knows this when he was on the House side. Democrats have carried that bill for a long time, and we never could get it this far. I don't think we ever got it out of committee, as I recall. So this is a huge leap. It goes from 50 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, and it's for non-residential use. It's not for resale, it's for use. And that is the only business supportive bill that I have seen in committee or on the floor of the House. But that's a good one, and we should be celebrating that. They've killed every other bill. They killed my pre-approval bill. They've killed lots of really good energy bills. So they've made it clear, they're willing to let this one through, and partly because a Republican carried it. And he's new, and they wanted to give him a pat on the back, and we'll take it, by God. That'll be good.
Yeah.
But that's about it in terms of energy. Chris, what have you seen on your side?
We've had we passed a bill for something called CPACE. So CPACE is the commercial, oh dear. It allows, it was brought by Senator McNally in Billings, and it allows for homeowners and businesses to go to their local banks and create a long-term investment, say a 5 or 7 or 10-year loan to put solar or wind on their property. And then it allows them to pay for that through their taxes instead of, in other words, it's sort of structurally helps smooth out and tampen down some of the crazy financial challenges of doing a project like that. And so we got it through the Senate Bill 147. Denise will be coming to you. And it's being done all over the country, and it's really, really good for private banks. So it's good for the private sector. And it also provides a real stimulus, not financial benefit per se, but it makes it far easier to get financing. So that's been exciting. But, we have really in the last 8 weeks have really swung and missed at a ton of, I think, really good bills. I brought 4 bills, one having to do with energy efficiency, creating an energy efficiency standard in the state of Montana. We don't have one. And there's, 28 states in the country that have them, and people save hundreds of dollars a year on their energy bills if you get the utilities to think about doing more with less and all that. It's a no-brainer. It's the cheapest way to create power, basically. And that was voted down 3 nights ago. Same with a bill that I brought for smart meters. I lost a bill on tax credits for wind developers attaching to the Colstrip line, which is east of us here between Townsend and Colstrip. There's a whole bunch of good wind power out there. And one of the big costs and one of the logjam, the choke points is getting to the 550 kV lines, the big power transmission lines to the West Coast, and getting attached. It cost like $1 million to create a substation just to attach to those lines. And so we were going to get the state to partner with that. That died. It didn't get out of committee. And I brought an EV bill that didn't get out of, I got it through committee and didn't get off the floor at 9:30 Monday night, died on the vine. I mean, these are complete no-brainer bills. These are bills that only have an upside, and there's no expense to any of them. So we're just in a holding pattern. We're losing time. I'm sure Denise would agree. Last session in 2019, Denise and I spent, half of our time up in Helena trying to fight the coal strip stuff, and and that we were able to derail that. So that was a win for us, but we also weren't able to work on 50 other bills that should have been discussed rather than coal strip. So there's a huge distraction factor. The utility, Northwestern Energy, in my opinion, and I know this is maybe for public dissemination, but I'm willing to say it. I think I have been so impressed with the lack of interest by our utility, Northwestern Energy, to sit down with folks, to sit down with the legislature and explain what it is they intend to do to help clean up our environment and start reducing the cost of power. Colstrip is a $76 a megawatt hour type facility. And hydro's $50, natural gas $47. Wind plus, so you pair it with storage now. You always pair these intermittent powers with batteries or other. We have big projects, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure being built right this second in Billings, north of Billings. Broadreach it's called. And they're going to be putting in 400 megawatts of solar plus storage and shipping all that power to the West Coast. So our utility is just completely sitting on its hands, head in the sand, totally non-responsive, killing all our bills. And frankly, it's getting a little more mean-spirited because they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on coal strip. By God, we're going to sell you $76 coal strip power from our, and I'm thinking, why are these folks the managers of our utility? Because they aren't paying attention and they're not available to us. They spend all their times in the halls of Congress, our state government, trying to unravel the regulatory structure that is the social compact. Will give you monopoly power. You can sell to your customers and they have no choice. They're captive. And on the other side, we ask you to listen when we ask for energy efficiency standards. And yet 2 nights ago, they stood up and said, no, we don't want those, thank you. Well, I'm trying to figure out a way that we get to a point, it'll be only with more votes, where we start dictating our legislative intent to clean up our environment and to make the businesses that run in this state that we have to work with to make sure that they're on the same page, because it's outrageous and it's unacceptable. And I'm really, as you can tell, Mr. Mild-mannered, I'm ready to, we're going to keep bringing it from here on out.
You were fired up and I love it. Thank you so much. And I just want to say, I'm going to interject here for a second. Elections have consequences. You'll hear me say that a lot, but elections have consequences. And so the more that we can get Democrats elected, the more that we can push for these renewable energy policies and to, actually protect our environment and, increase, help ratepayers and et cetera, et cetera. Denise, did you have anything to say about that?
Well, I totally agree with Chris. We're going to have a reckoning. Last week, number 4, the coal strip plants 1, 2, 3, and 4 was down. And I'm not sure if it's back up and operating, but it is, we only have 2 left. 1 and 2 have closed. So our options as a state are narrowing quickly. And as Chris said, we have Northwestern who is not thinking for our future. It's not planning on anything for our future. They keep sticking their toe in the water of let's keep Colstrip going at any cost. And they're facilitated in that by the PSC and definitely a certain faction of the Republican Party. And they're happy campers. You know, they're at some point they're going to start having rolling brownouts, which they claim happened a few weeks ago or last week. It did not happen. That's a lie. But they're going to spread lies and mistruths about energy in Montana so that they make us frightened enough that we will get on board the coal, natural gas, nuclear, you name it, gravy train. And they are not providing leadership at all. And our partners, Puget, Avista, Pacific Corp, and Talon, who is an unknown. We have no idea about the financial records of Talon, who manages Colstrip. I mean, they could go out and get someone else to manage Colstrip, and they could do a horrible job, and the ratepayers would not be able to say boo about it. So there are a lot of moving parts to this, and energy companies in Washington and Oregon, they look at us and they go, we're out of here.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what they're doing. They're saying, we can't trust you. You're not very thoughtful in your decision making. And on top of it, you're going to leave us holding the bag. So it's almost like that game of who gets out first wins. I can't think of the name of the game, but you get my drift. And it's not going to be good at all.
Denise, you're going to be getting a bill, Senate Bill 84 from Dwayne Ankeny. Ankeny is the senator from Colstrip, and he's a decent human being. He's got his community in mind, and he's very good at being very coal-centric. Okay, fine. But Ankeny brought a bill that passed out of the Senate 35-14 that will take the Montana Consumer Council, which is established by our Constitution. It's a independent, entity that argues in front of the PSC and other regulatory bodies on behalf of consumers because they are captive. So it's the one backstop, and they're not necessarily progressive. They're really all about least cost, and that's their drill and that's their mission. That entity under this bill that's coming to you, Denise, will be shoved into ETIC. It will lose its independent standing. ETIC will become its parent. ETIC, you guys, is the Energy and Telecom Interim Committee, which is a legislative body with folks like us, half Republican, half Democrat, but it is a full-on political body. So this Consumer Council, which is meant to be independent and call its own shots, and sometimes push back at legislators for having policies that don't protect consumers. This entity is going to get shoved and be directed by a political body for the first time since 1972, this Constitution that we rewrote in 1972. And it's very, very concerning, and it's coming to you, Denise. So lucky you.
Well, Chris, if we kill your bad bills, you've got to kill our bad bills. How's that?
Yeah, I'm here to do that.
That's a good deal. Let's work on that. And that's a good reminder for all of us that, the bills that have passed one chamber, they have to be heard again in the second chamber. And we have a chance to testify. We have a chance to submit comments again. We have a chance to stop these bad bills again. So there's still more work to do, and there's still more ways that we can influence what will happen in the second part of the session. So that's a really good question or thing to bring up at that point. So Sandra asked another really great question. we're kind of running out of time, but I love this question. Do we have an education bill to help communities, especially in rural areas, to learn about the benefits of renewable energy? Or could we sponsor one at some point?
Well,
I think that's a laudable goal. I just not with this session. No, I don't see it happening. Plus, bills needed to have been introduced and already passing through. You could possibly amend an education bill with that, but I don't see any appetite on the Republican side to do that. Quite frankly, I don't know. Chris, what do you think?
yeah, I think the season is pretty cooked. I mean, there still will be new bills coming, but you know, the extension service, our university system, there are ways that we could identify, and I'm going to guess that our energy office there in the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, there is an energy office and it's full of really good folks. And I'm almost guaranteed that they have some marketing programs. But Sandra, to your point, I don't think there is a really robust program for trying to identify all the reasons, you know, including cost, why these technologies are ready for Montana, especially in rural areas for distributed power generation. That to me is, boy, you could drive a truck down that boulevard. It's exciting. And I'll just say right now that there are people on this call who we would encourage to consider, you know, coming up to Helena and doing good work. And so that's a segue to Sandra and to others on this call. I'm excited. I think there's a lot of great ideas. What we have to do though is the discipline that Allison's bringing to the process, and Elizabeth, the discipline that's being brought day in, day out, things that have to happen, stuff that you'd never think about that has to happen in order for us to be effective on the ground and in our elections. That, you know, that's what's going to make the difference here. And it's a heavy lift, but I don't know, I guess I try to stay optimistic.
Which is why we need more people to be making these lifts with us. And there is plenty of opportunity to do that. So if you're interested in getting involved, reach out to me. I'll post information on contacting me or Elizabeth. But there's a lot of room for us to be all involved in a variety of different ways. Running for office, please, if you're thinking about it, let's do it. Announce before the session is over so that we can celebrate. This is the future. We're in this mud right now, but this is the future. So just think about that. And thank you for bringing that up, Chris. I think that is important to remember. Alice, you have a question. You have your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, everybody here, for your report. So, Chris, when you were talking, it really brought me back to K. Ross Toole's History of Montana class I took at UM about how Montana is the extractive state. So exactly what you're talking about. People from out of state come in, take everything, and leave the mess, right? Like Butte's a great example of that. So Northwest Energy, I think they're like crooks. So are they just making a lot of money? And are the Republicans who want to disenfranchise the energy system, is that like Texas? Like, is that their goal, to take away the infrastructure? And then we see what happened in Texas. Is that their goal, or are they making money off of it? Or yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question, Elsa. I know some of the answer. Northwestern Energy is a risk-averse organization, and they have a monopoly, so they don't have to do anything. Pretend if we were with Bell Telephone, and some of you might be old enough, remember back in those days. I've got, I'll just show you right here. Remember that? I don't know if you can see it. Bell telephone. I keep that next to me because I called Maddie's folks and that when I asked her to marry me on that phone, and that was, anyway, that's a aside. But those phones, and you know, the idea is that monopolies don't have much incentive to change. And I think that's part of it, to be fair with them. I mean, if you were sitting in their board of directors or something, you'd be saying, well, why would we move a muscle if we're making money? Let's not do anything unless we're going to make some money. They'll make all the statements about consumers and the environment, but and I hate to say this, it breaks my heart, but I think increasingly I distrust whether that's true. I don't think at the individual level, I'm talking at the structural level, organizationally, I'm not sure that they're really that committed to that. And it's because of the profit motive. And I think they've got a good thing going. So the other part that I'll just mention, and then Denise, you can, is, you know, coal is a very, very concentrated resource. And back in the day, 1978, when I worked at the solar lobby on K Street in Connecticut, in Washington, DC, you know, that's something nobody knows about. I was trying to get the solar thing to happen with the Carter administration and stuff. And back then we would have that little, and I was a hippie, but you know, the idea was that you couldn't control the wind and the sun. And there's, you know, and I'm not quite, you know, as mesmerized by that talking point anymore. Coal has done an amazing amount of stuff for our state. You know, we've schooled our kids, you know, it's you know, literally the coal revenues are in every part of our state budget. So it is painful to go down, start thinking down that path, and renewables, and you know, they're not going to have the same profile that coal has had. But coal was a one-time deal. And if you talk to Mark Haggerty at the Headwaters Economics, you know, he'll say, you know, for you know, hundreds of years or whatever, you know, Anaconda, we've been all in on one thing, and that thing then changes, and all of a sudden, and obviously, you know, we're like a third world country. We're sending all of our money out of town and out of state. We are totally a third world country in that regard. And so Mark, and I'm going to be working with him because he's got some ideas about how to educate, Cassandra's point a minute ago, how to educate folks that we cannot be undiversified. We have got to have a diversified, and we have a diversified economy in Bozeman, and it's worked for us. But we have to think in those terms from now on. We can't be all in on one thing because eventually that's going to end. Coal has finished up, and it's been awesome in certain ways for everybody. Carter was the one who put Colstrip in place, by the way. It was federal dollars from the Carter administration, Jimmy Carter, who enabled the Colstrip project, just so you know. So at this point, you know, we have a lot still to learn, and we have to really rethink so many things. I think it's the money, and it's the lack of being willing to take risk, but just, you know, go online and Google Excel, and that's XCEL. Denise knows this organization down in Colorado. Google Puget Sound Energy or Avista or Pacific Core. These are all utilities. And on their webpage, they will have 53 things that we're doing to get to a clean economy, energy economy, right? Our folks here are just spending way too much time, God knows doing what. They're not on the ball, and they don't have the right staff, and they're good people. It's not a personal thing. It's just organizationally, they are upside down and don't know the next step. So I better be quiet here because, you know.
Well, I'll wind up, Chris.
Here.
I'm fond of saying this legislature was all about jobs and business. Governor Gianforte made that the centerpiece. And so we've gone from the boardroom to the bedroom. And that's really where their focus is. It's to really limit what we can do in our personal lives. And it has nothing to do with business or jobs. And so energy is certainly an area where one should be investing in job creation. And renewables are definitely a strong part of the equation. But as Chris pointed out, we have a monopoly that's not really interested. And to answer Alice's question about Texas, we're not Texas, because we can go out on the imbalanced market and purchase energy. Texas was, like a castle with the moat. They couldn't purchase energy from outside the state of Texas. So we're in better shape that way. But with that said, and as Chris pointed out very well, the people in charge are not interested in any sort of real discussion about renewables in our portfolio. They're showing themselves to be, they talk the talk, and sure, they have the glorious ads and showing clean water and hydro, and they love to tout the solar project outside of Bozeman. I'm sure you've seen it. That's a tiny part of what needs to happen in Montana. And until Northwestern has a change in leadership, or their stockholders rebel, or some of their major investors rebel, I don't think we're going to see a change. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep pushing, as Chris was talking about, continue to educate ourselves, continue to bring good bills, and most importantly, elect the right people.
Right on.
Amen to that. Thank
Amen.
you. Yes, absolutely. It is now 7 o'clock. I think that was like the perfect ending. We have 3 more of these conversations scheduled for the rest of the week. So we have a double header tomorrow evening, starting at 6 p.m. And then we also have one Friday at 5:30. It's on our website. If you've registered for this one, since you've joined, you now can join the others. So feel free to come. We have different legislators every night. Thank you, Chris and Denise, so much for your time. And please get some rest, unplug. We'll see you again on Monday.
Allison.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.